Thanks, Waldo. I really am honored to be here. We talked about it being a safety briefing, and the reality is what I'm here to help everybody understand who owns or operates basically any kind of airplane is some of the things that I see that are repetitive in nature, okay? And some of them can maybe be a safety issue. We all, granted, we all are a little bit involved in an activity that has some risk to it, more than maybe a good percentage of the population. And then we add on the experimental side, if you want to call it that, our home-built airplanes, so there's a little more risk factor. And here in the Falcon Squadron, I know from my perch over there at Base Leg Aviation, I get to see all the formation takeoffs every day. As a matter of fact, I'm always yelling at my son to pay attention, let's get the work done. But we've added a lot more risk there. So my intent today is to show you some of the areas that I think we all ought to pay attention to on our airplanes. They are things that I have seen that constantly are repetitive in nature, and the ones I'm going to show you today to help drive that point home have all been discovered in the last few months, meaning I think most of them are here since February of this year. And that doesn't mean I just discovered these, it means voila, there it is again, okay? So that's what this is all about. Please don't hesitate to interrupt as I go through any of these. You don't understand something, because at the end of the day, I will know that I've been successful here if you go, I need to go look at my airplane. Because that's what really warms my heart. Some of you probably know I write for kit planes, and those are the best letters that I get, is when somebody writes to me and says, you know what, I went out and found that on my airplane just from your article, thank you. That's what it's all about. I'm not smarter than anybody else. As a matter of fact, I'm very, very honored to be here speaking to this team. Some of the accomplishments here in the RV Squadron are things that most of us can only dream about, or we read about in places. So it's about to share some of the things that I'm seeing, and I hope it works for all of you, okay? So that being said, I have not staged any of these pictures. I want to make certain we're clear on that. I'm not here to embarrass anybody tonight. If you raise your hand and go, hey, that's mine, that's up to you. I'm not going to point anybody out here for your picture. They're all on flying aircraft, okay? They're not new discoveries, I mentioned that. I only see a small percentage of the fleet. If I think about the number of RVs that I've looked at as a DAR and as pre-buy, and then the ones I've been maintaining for the last 6 years, it's probably up around maybe 600 to 800 airplanes. It's, a little less than 10% of the fleet. My confidence is that the problems you're going to see here are out there in the rest of the fleet, and potentially on some of the airplanes owned by people in this room, okay? So, and some are safety problems, some are just maintenance issues. Anybody want to take a guess on the first thing I'm going to talk about? Jam nuts, okay? It's got to be a plague out there. I just can't figure it out. And yes, I'm on it. You've seen our shirts. By the way, for those of you out of town, we have shirts for you here tonight with the motto on the back, "Are your nuts tight?" We're hoping that catches on. I'm just amazed. I've been writing about jam nuts for years. Probably at least 6 years now, if I think about what I've been publishing. And as late as this week, we're still finding jam nuts on flying airplanes, okay? So here's one. These are recently now, by the way. This is the aileron control rod, right? No jam nut. By the way, that's visible on a pre-flight. There's the autopilot control rod. Somebody here might recognize that. Somebody installed an autopilot servo and never tightened up the jam nut there. That's, an autopilot is one of those things that actually is a major mod. You're affecting the flight controls, right? So you really want to pay attention when you install these things, or if you're having somebody else do them for you. Those of you who fly RVs, these are elevator spars, okay? Those are the jam nuts that go into the hind bearing that actually goes back into the spar. Just in the last year, I have found these on at least about a half a dozen airplanes, and one had been flying 7 years. One had actually been flying 15 years. These two pictures are since the beginning of this year on airplanes, okay? So, you know, I don't mean to be cross, but no excuse. It's a pre-flight item, especially on a tail dragger. You can see it, it stares you right there in the face. No, I did not loosen these to demonstrate anything. You can see they were never tightened. I need your pointer. If you look over here, you'll see that there are no score marks around the pane. So they've been like that way since day one. So you can count up, bless you, count up the number of pre-flights, count up the number of condition inspections. Yes?
Rick, as you personally know, I'm probably the only non-mechanic, non-builder right here. Probably everybody else is. If you could make it like a first grader, I know you can't totally, but the best you can. Thank you. Like I'm a first grader.
Okay. Do you understand what I'm talking about, or what did I miss?
Aileron, elevator.
These are both on the elevator.
And I can see these when I'm doing my pre-flight.
Yes, you can. They're on the tail. Matter of fact, when we get done with this presentation, I think we have enough samples of aircraft in here. If anybody wants to know where exactly these things are, we can go around and find them. Hopefully we won't find any loose jam nuts. I can see the owners now going, okay. Everybody's, yeah, let's go look at the red one over there. I wonder who built that one. Everybody stay seated.
Give me 3 steps.
Okay. Here's 2 more. Okay, I know these colors look familiar to somebody. Both loose. RV8. It's not like it's on a 737 or something. You can see these things, okay? And if you don't want to tighten the jam nuts, let's just not install them. Okay? This was discovered just yesterday. That is the jam nut. I told you we were talking about safety items. There's supposed to be a jam nut right there. That is the tube that goes between the 2 sticks in an RV. So if that baby comes loose, you'll have 1 aileron to work with. Okay? By the way, this one's been flying a long time. Okay, so enough on jam nuts. Everybody's going to go check their jam nuts, right? Please. Please go check your jam nuts. By the way, the ones back here, what really drives me nuts about these showing up loose is there's a service bulletin from Vans on the loose jam nuts because it actually can cause a structural problem back there. It'll cause cracking. That nut needs to be tight to carry the load there of that elevator. Okay? Without that being tight, you'll get some cracking there. So what confuses me is how you sign off a condition inspection every year. It says you've looked at the service bulletins and find it in a condition for safe operation, and the jam nuts are loose. There's at least a piece of paper that's pointing you where to look at them. Okay? So,
hey, Vic?
Yes?
Somebody asked me recently how many jam nuts. They said, where are the jam nuts? How many are there? There's like 14.
There's more than 14 because most recently I inspected an RV-14 that had 14 loose jam nuts. And there were a couple of tight ones. So there are quite a few jam nuts in an airplane that it's the whole control system, it's the elevator, all of your throttle, your engine linkage, anywhere where there's a rod end bearing actually, one of the hind bearings. So on your engine controls linkage, your flat push rods, your elevator, your torque tubes that go between all the controls inside, they all have jam nuts on them. So there are a lot of them. You know what though? I'm sure there's one out there that's come loose. My experience has been if they're tightened, they don't come loose. Okay, so tighten them, and what I recommend is everybody use some torque seal. You familiar with torque seal? Or steal some of your wife's nail polish. Tighten up the jam nut, put a little mark line on there, and then it's a quick pre-flight item, and it's a quick condition inspection item too. You can see that they haven't moved. All right, let's get off of that, and let's talk about the next thing that I see. How many people here, and you see on the forums, boy, I have heating problems. My engine won't cool. Anybody hear that or see that or experience that here? Hey, come on, we can all be honest with each other, right? Okay? This is the #1 cause. And I can say that with a lot of confidence because personally I've built, I think at least 6 different RVs. And you know what? I've not had any heating or cooling problems with any of them. If you build them the way the plans say to build them, they're probably going to do okay. right? But that takes into account that you're going to have the throttle going full forward and the mixture going full rich. Again, this is a flying airplane. I think this one was last week. I have a stack of these pictures. This is one of the most common items I find when I go license an airplane as a DAR. Nobody checks the throttle in the mixture or the governor to make certain you have full travel on them. And part of the problem is the engine manufacturers and the fuel servo and the carburetor guys tend to send them with a standard linkage arm on each of those devices. And most of the throttle and the other engine controls that we have don't actually travel enough. And you got to take that arm off and drill another hole so you don't have quite the arc. Or you can order engine controls that have more throw to them. You can also do that as well. But this is a big item, and it directly affects cooling and performance. Here's another one.
Have you found that on E14s?
Yes, I have. The question was, do I find them on 14s? I found them on all airplanes.
Well,
Okay.
follow-up question. In every case where you have the legs only hold on and cooling if you do it, is it one of these things where every case you need to modify that part?
Not every case, okay? Some do. Sometimes you just need to adjust the linkage. Sometimes what will happen is you'll have it set up such that you'll pull it back to maybe idle cutoff, but you've still got a lot of throw left and didn't recognize that. And you can move that linkage right there, either at the throttle quadrant or the engine control or right at the engine to do that. So the question was if I found them on any RV-14s. Just, it's been 2 weeks now. I went down to Jacksonville to license a 14 and make the first flight. It was like that. So we fixed it before we made the first flight. How many people use the K&N air filter in their airplanes? How many people just pull them out and clean them and don't bother to look at whether they're full size anymore? I see a lot of these. Probably, I don't know, we're going through 3 or 4 air filters about every 2 weeks right now. They come in and they're shrunken. See that one on the left? See what it looks like? And here's a new one. You know whose airplane that was on? Mine. I'm not going to pick on anybody here when I ask a name. That one was on mine, and you know what? I replaced it last year. I flew 300 hours. They do shrink. They look good from the front when you poke your head in there and look. If you do that on a pre-flight, right? You look down the snout, look at the air filter. You got to kind of look up in there and see if it's. You got little things that hang down to hold that air filter in place, and you can see that it's shrunken. And if you're not really paying attention, how many people here do oil samples? A good sign is you'll start to see your silica, which is dirt, on your oil sample start to go up over time. It not only shrinks in diameter, it tends to shrink in height as well. So you start sucking unfiltered air into the engine. So that's another clue for you.
How long does it last?
You know, I don't know if they're making them differently. They used to last longer than they do now. You got to look at it. I don't know if I stick it in there and don't fly all year, if it's going to stay full size, or if I fly 100 hours or I fly 300 hours. Okay? But I would take a look at it. Here, by the way, these are real pictures. Scotch-Brite as an air filter does not work. Okay? It just doesn't work. And this is, I don't know how many times I've seen this. Okay? And again, this was on a new airplane I went down to license last week, actually, a Ford T-18 down in Jacksonville. Or not Jacksonville, in Tampa. Wheel pant brackets. How many people here safety wire the wheel pant bracket? Okay, how many people here own RVs? Those hands didn't match.
Don't have wheel pants.
Okay? If you have wheel pants, if you take a look at the plans, that bolt right there on the left is supposed to be safety. That wheel pant actually does this. Have you all seen it? Especially you guys in formation, you look over at the other guy, you've seen the wheel pant go up and down. There's rotation there. Any bolt or nut or whatever subject to rotation needs a cotter key or some kind of stop mechanism, right? Get a load of this. You see that hole? This was safety at one time. And I'm going to tell a story here, and I'm not going to pick on anybody. My name is in this logbook from about 3 years ago that I safety wired that wheel pan. It came back, I think last week, the drilled head bolt is gone, and it's not safety wired. Okay? My son loves to catch me. I don't know if any of you know Nick, my son, is working with me. He's probably going to be 3 times better than I am when we're done here. He loves when airplanes come in that I've been working on, and he'll see something that's not right. And he'll go, so Dad, you worked on this one? And he caught this one, and he's giving me flack for it, and I kind of went over and looked at the logbook, and I said, look at this. I did it, and I put my signature on that we did safety it. So it's one that's easy to get missed. These are 2 different airplanes, by the way. This one at least has the drilled head, got the drilled head bolt in it, but no safety wire. Do safety wire. I went and did a pre-buy on one airplane out in Texas, and I was explaining to the gentleman, we had the one wheel pant off, that bolt required safety wire. And the builder argued with me, and I asked him to pull off the other wheel pant, and the bolt was gone. So I didn't have to say anything more on that one. Okay? Brake calipers. Again, these are 2 different ones in the last few weeks. You got to safety wire those bolts. Okay? It's required to safety wire. They're drilled head. Or you can use, anybody seen the Nord washers? Okay, the Nord washers are a real good substitute, and I like using those on the brake calipers as well. So it eliminates the safety wire. They're kind of interlocking washers, and they won't come apart. So pay attention to those, please. How many people here check the date codes on their hoses in their engine compartments? Anybody? Okay, we got one who changes them. Great. How often do you change them, Vern?
I just sent my 6/8 stuff back get everything pressure tested.
Okay. So anybody want to guess on what life of the hoses are?
5 to 7.
What did I hear?
5 to 7.
5 to 7, yeah. 5 to 8 years, usually about 8 years. There's a date code of first quarter 67. I think that's past the time of being replaced. Okay? Actually, I did bring some props tonight. I'm going to pass some around. These are hoses that we took off just this week. Okay? You would think it would be a little more flexible than this.
It's running away.
Okay?
You're pressing buttons.
Oh, bummers. Okay, hold on. Let's see if I can get it started. Sorry about that. Where's your... I got it. Thanks, Noel. Sorry about that. Here's a piece of flexible hose following those 2 around so you can kind of see the difference. I mean, you're kind of risking your airplane. We got high pressure in those hoses. Oil pressure line, the ones in oil pressure line I think I'm passing around is quite brittle. You know, we're running oil pressure in there. It's pretty hot, right? About 3 gallons a minute. There's really high flow in the oil line. So you're kind of risking your air, you get a leak or the hose burst, you don't have much of a time to make a decision there on what you're going to do without any oil pressure. Okay. ELTs. How many people have an ELT in their airplane? Oh good, I hope everybody. I had somebody arguing with me today in their RV8 that they didn't need an ELT, they had a personal locator beacon. Sorry, that doesn't fly, pardon the pun. Okay? We still have to use ELTs. The one on the left is the EBC one. It's got a shipping pin in it, right? That pin needs to be removed right here, or this G switch doesn't work. Okay? Yes?
Quick educate me, the ELT is the 121.5, the 406, whatever.
They can be both.
Don't you have to have 406 and not so much ELT anymore?
Any new ones have to be 406, new installations. The 125s are still there. The U.S., my understanding is only the Russians are monitoring 121.5 now. Okay, so, but we are, and the 406 works. If you set off your 406 and you have it, you know.
If I throw the 121.5 away, I'm good, buy a new one.
Yes, yes, absolutely. You can put a 406 in. And if you set it off in your hangar, they're going to call you from the Air Force Base in Florida. it goes off immediately. We don't test the 406s the way we used to test the 121.5s, right? We used to test 121.5s at the top of the hour, turn them on. The 406s, you do it according to the manufacturer's instruction manual. Most of them just have a reset button. You push on it and you listen for a beep or two.
And then you started talking about the PLD, and then I started writing, and I missed that.
A personal
PLD,
locator
I'm like,
beacon is like a spot, or some people have them in their
Well,
watches.
the kind that calls up the postcard, the house number. And it gives your own name and your own GPS and where you actually are.
Right.
It's not good, better than anything.
Well, so the question is, are basically the personal locator beacons better than anything? I will tell you, we carry a spot, we carry a personal locator beacon,
Yeah.
but we don't get to make the decision on whether or not we carry the LT. It's part of the FARs. We have to carry the LT.
Of course.
I did hear, this is an interesting story, so I've always carried the spot, especially when we make our trips to Alaska. I had conversations with the gentleman, he's actually a fellow board member at EAA, who is responsible for Canadian air rescue operations. And he told me that they have an unlimited budget when an ELT goes off. Not so with a personal locator beacon. Because everybody's using those today, from hikers, swimmers, anybody, and they're not going to spend a pile of money until they actually get confirmation that it's a downed aircraft and lives might be in danger. So that was interesting to me. So I do know if we go down, I'm going to make sure the LT goes off, and I'm also going to use the personal locator beacon as well.
But that was Canada.
Oh, it's Canadian operations. I don't know how it
America.
works. I don't know. I can't speak to it. I didn't ask here. Sorry. But I do know we have to carry an ELT.
Understood.
Okay.
Any comments on anything you've heard about the little stickers you get on the 406 every couple of years, the re-registration, to put it on the panel if you can, or in the logbook?
Yeah, so the question from Vern is, I think it's 3 years, we have to re-register your 406 beacon with the NOAA. So they send you a notice and you send them your address and everything. And by the way, that's one of the things you have to remember to do when you sell your airplane. We all do the registration change. If you have 406, you got to remember to do that as well. You tell the new owner to do that. And what happens is they'll send you a letter back and says you're good for 3 years, thank you, and they send you a sticker. And the question is, what do we do with that sticker? What I do is put it right with the ELT, okay? Or you can put it in the aircraft logbooks. I guess you could put it on the panel if you want. Some of the new panels out there, people don't want you touching anything on their panels today, so I've not put the sticker on panels yet. Okay? Service bulletins. This one drives me nuts as well. This is the flat motor safety bulletin that's been out since, Greg, help me, I don't know, the early 90s at least. Okay? That jam nut here, right there is supposed to safety wire it and then run some safety wire up around that bolt. It's a service bulletin. So you should check it once a year when you do the condition inspection minimum, right? And okay, I get it that the one on the right is kind of hidden inside the flap electric motor housing right between the pilot and the passenger seat. But you know this one on the left? That's in an RV-8. It's a pre-flight on it. You can see it every time you pre-flight. It's not covered. Okay? So no, you have a jam nut on there. The jam nut goes on there. The problem with this one, Don, is the failure mode. If the jam nut should come loose, this housing will spin completely off, and you won't have any flaps. Okay? That's the difference in that one. Okay, I get a kick out of people trying to cheat on service bulletins. I know a number of you here in the Falcon Squadron have worked on the tail service bulletin on the 6.7s and the other aerobatic airplanes with the potential cracking in the service bulletin. It's a hard one to do. The service bulletin says you can stop drill the crack. It also says you need to replace and you need to install the doubler. So you don't get away with just drilling it, nor do you get away with just a stop drill. To me, this borders on criminal, doing this on an airplane and then selling the airplane to somebody and telling them that the service bulletin has been done. Okay? Not everybody's a builder. We have a lot of people today coming from the certified world, as many of you have here, and you take somebody's word for it when they tell you the airplanes, things have been done. Clearly not done right here. Okay? Labeling the controls. This is the rear seat of an RV-8. How would you like to take your non-flying passenger for a ride on a hot summer day? And you're sitting out there waiting for takeoff clearance. Oh, maybe that's the vent handle. Just as you break ground. And they pull it back. Not cool, huh? So I see a lot of these. I won't license an airplane, actually, without the controls being labeled. I don't know how they get by other DARs, because it is a requirement. And it could be added after the fact. Somebody could add this throttle after it's been licensed, but you gotta label your controls, please. That would just be horrible if somebody did that. Fuel caps. I bet I can walk out here and find a number of airplanes with fuel caps labeled. It's a requirement that they're labeled with quantity and type, right? I know a bunch of you are old enough to remember why, all the accidents we had, including Bob Hoover almost getting killed, right, with jet fuel being put into avgas type airplanes, all right? It's a requirement that they be labeled. Glenn?
Total or usable?
Well, that's a good question. Is it total or usable? We've always labeled them as total, because that's what the fuel tank is supposed to hold. I've never seen it mentioned any other way that it's usable, right? Here's one, and I see a number of these, a broken throttle cable. If you can see this one, again, these are pictures of things that are repeatable. You see the throttle cable housing is broken there because it's been rubbing against this exhaust heat shield, and it catches. How would you like that throttle cable to let go of, you know? How many people here fly their airplanes on instruments? Yeah. Okay, throttle's pretty important, right? And for those of you doing formation takeoffs right next to each other, you gotta make certain this thing is solid, okay? How many people here have PMEGs? Good, so I hope you'll pay attention to this one because I'm seeing way too many of these. The PMEG wiring, and I'm gonna show you, matter of fact, I'm gonna show you what an unsupported wire. Here's one from today. This was a main ground wire for all the functions on the stick. It's on by one strand because the wire's unsupported. When wires sit there in our vibration environment and they do this, eventually they're going to break. How many people think the ignition system's pretty important? Now, come on. Everybody sleeping already? Look at this wiring right here. And here's the Adele clamp right to the engine tube, engine mount tube. No, 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 no. This engine vibrates. We've all seen them shake. How many people who are flying the 4-cylinder RVs or Lycomings? They shake like a wet dog when we start them up and shut them down, don't they? This is gonna break. How do you like this one right here? Here's the Adele clamp that the PMEG gets shipped with, installed on the PMEG to run the wiring through this and into the connector. It's pretty important. This one was installed by somebody in this room. So I'm asking you guys to please go check your airplanes. Make sure you've got them wired properly, okay? Already showed you that one. Static lines. This one I see. I bet 50% of the airplanes I see have this problem. It comes out, this is your static port on the side of the airplane. It comes out. What do you think happens right there? Water. You know, it won't happen to me. How many people park their airplanes outside when you go on a trip? So I had one RV-10 come to us, and he said, hey, I need you to check the autopilot. It's not working. I said, what it's doing? He says, the altitude hold won't work. And I let him go on and describe some more things, and I did a ground check on the autopilot. Everything's working fine. I said, hold on a minute. His line went straight down, and I drained a cup of water out of the static system. Right? Rerouted it. He's never had a problem since, so we didn't have to spend any money on the autopilot. This is what you need to do. Although this one's a little tight, okay, is you got to come up higher than this, T to the other one, and then come forward, and you won't get any water in it. Okay? You'll be in for a real rude awakening. You know, you go on a trip, you park, and it gets a rainstorm overnight, and you depart into instrument conditions and expecting the autopilot and everything else to work, It's just not gonna work, okay? So go check that one if you would. This one is really, really scary, and I've seen this one multiple times. And this is, you know, the kits today are so good, especially the Vans kits, and there's a couple other manufacturers out there as well. They are assembly projects. Nobody has to look at blueprints anymore, especially on the RV14s, RV10s, and even the 12. It's an assembly project. And people put together very complicated engine, the whole firewall forward package comes with all the hoses and drawings. It says connect this, connect this, connect this. It doesn't necessarily tell you all the time what you should cap or not connect. Or, and I don't mean to sound, you know, cross here, but most people don't really understand what all they're connecting and what all those things do. In this case, this is the fuel servo spider, the distribution spider on top of an injected engine. And for those of you, anybody here, I know we got a bunch of guys my age in here. Remember we had the old analog fuel flow gauge in some of the airplanes we flew? It was just a big needle, usually right with the manifold pressure gauge, right? Bonanzas had them. All that was a pressure gauge. That's all it was a pressure gauge. Guess where it got its pressure from? Right here. Because that's the way the fuel servo works in an airplane. When we move that throttle, it measures air, and it just increases the pressure to this distribution block. Okay? So they come from the factory, so you can hook up the gauge there. They've been coming that way for 100 years. You gotta cap it off, and not with a plastic cap. Again, this is on a flying airplane. The worst one I saw would have been flying 7 years. I told them I wanted their guardian angel. I was absolutely amazed. It hadn't come loose, and it hadn't melted, and it hadn't caused a big fire. How many people here have slick magnetos on their engine? How many people know there's a 500-hour service bulletin? Okay. How many people don't know about the 500-hour service bulletin? Good. I like the way the hands go like this. Come on. We're here for education. This isn't meant to embarrass. There is a 500-hour service bulletin on slick magnetos, right? And you know what? Usually, how it manifests itself is it slowly deteriorates and becomes harder starting, especially when it's hot. You're trying to figure out what you're doing, what changed. Why? I thought I'm doing all the same procedures. Da, da, da. So the carbon brushes, the one on the left. Pardon the lighting in here. I don't know if you can see it. I just took this one out of a magneto last week. You can see the difference in diameter here. It was overdue by 1,000 hours. Overdue by 1,000 hours. And that 1,000 hours was like about 8 or 9 years. So there's a lot of condition inspections that were done, and somebody signed it off, and these weren't done. Here's the new brush for comparison. You also change out the contact points. If it's got an impulse coupling on it, you'll change out that spring, and you can also change out the capacitor, and you just kind of look at the coil and make sure it's not swollen or anything. But you really ought to pay attention to those, okay? Most people who have bought an airplane don't understand that needs to be done, right? These are real pictures of plugs that just came out of airplanes here recently. It takes a good spark to make the thing run, okay? You can see the gaps here. Anybody want to take a guess what the spark gap should be on magneto-fired spark plugs? 16 to 22, I hear.
16 to 18.
Come on, speak up.
I want to say 16 to 18.
Very good. Okay. 16 to 18. 22 starts to get a little big. It gets harder to spark, especially when it's hot. Okay. These are huge gaps here. This one's also oval. This one is just borderline, throw it away, start over. Okay. Oh, there's one more thing I want to tell you about spark plugs. I'm gonna pass a spark plug around here. How many people use the fine wire spark plugs in their airplane? Great. Yeah, I do too. They're expensive, right? They're about 4 times the cost. Guess what? They still fail. Champion had a problem with them for quite a while. And you look at it, clean it, gap it, it's good. How come it won't start? These plugs, the resistance is through the roof. So you want to check your spark plugs not only for gap, but also for resistance. And you want somewhere, you know, the book says less than 5,000 ohms. I find less than 2,000, they'll spark better. If you start, these are open, by the way, and I only brought one, but 12 of them came out of an RV-10. None of them passed the resistance test of 5,000 ohms, by the way. The airplane wouldn't start. So when you have high resistance like this, it also eats up the contact points in your magneto. Okay, so we'll just pass that one around. Let's talk about one other thing here I didn't make a slide on. How many people have a key switch in their airplane? How many people know there's service bulletins against the key switches? And actually ADs in one case. Well, I only saw one person nod. Okay. How many people do a grounding check when you shut down your engine?
Not everybody.
Not everybody. Okay. Let me tell you, I personally have almost been killed twice by an engine that had a defective key switch in it. I check every one when we're checking the magneto timing to make sure it works both in the left and right position, right? Because that's what we do on every run-up, right? Check it, and if we get a drop on each mag, oh good, it's working, it's grounding each mag. Guess what? You didn't check it in the off position. The off is totally separate inside this switch. So I do it every time before I shut down. I'll turn the key switch to off and make certain I get a little miss on the engine. Otherwise, it's very, very, very dangerous thing. This one had that problem, okay? Coils, how many people here have light speed electronic ignition? Yeah, me too. I like it and I find it very, very reliable. There's also a recommendation for the spark plug wires on those to change them every 500 hours or 5 years, I think it is. Okay? If you ohm them out, they will get open, and the coils go bad. Actually, when we go on our long trips, like to Alaska or something, I'll carry a spare coil. They get high resistance in them. Okay? And you won't notice it when you're flying. You'll notice it over time. It gets harder and harder to start. Okay? So it looks fine, but it's no good. All right, enough on ignitions. Here's one that just really drives me nuts. And I should have brought a washer. I'm sorry that I didn't. Spark plug with electronic ignition. You put these adapters in, right? Because we're using the little automotive plugs. They're 14 millimeter versus our 18 millimeter spark plugs. So you have an adapter there. Guess what? The copper washer that we use on the spark plugs, you still have to put on these adapters. We pulled 4 out of an airplane yesterday. Okay? It really boogers up the cylinders, by the way, turning like that without a washer there. Okay? So you got to pay attention to that one. And 2, everybody know the copper washers go on one way versus another. If you look at them, they're a little bit concave and they're flat with the concave surface towards the engine, so it does a good sealing job there. Right?
Okay.
Yes?
But what on what now? I was writing.
I'm sorry, Don. What needs to go right here, and I meant to bring one, my apologies. There's a copper washer that should go right here.
But copper versus.
Copper's the only thing. They're copper washers. They're normal 18 millimeter copper washers, spark plug washers.
There's one on the spark plug you're passing
Well,
around.
Was there a washer still on it? Okay.
What? You said you can only put on copper washers. Don't do something. You said.
Oh, I was talking about the way the copper washer goes. Thank you. Copper washer is concave on one surface and flat machined on the other side. Put the concave surface towards the engine. Right?
Okay.
Got it? Missing baffling bolts. That's a very common one. We got a vibrating kind of environment out there, so check those. The other thing here, and I wish I'd have panned this picture out a little more, and we found another one here today, and we see this about every other week we'll see one. Has anybody here ever seen any high-speed photography of the cylinders on our engines when an engine's running? They shake like a wet dog, okay? You do not tie these cylinders together. The baffling up there has to slide, it's meshed. We see a number of airplanes come through where they've actually ran a brace, tying both cylinders together. It just creates all kinds of havoc and cracking. So do not tie your cylinders together. Make certain the baffling is free to slide. How many people here have had radio problems on an airplane you've bought, purchased, or you've dealt? Again, these aren't staged. This was one that came in with poor radio reception. I see this a lot. That shield wasn't crimped. It's got to get a crimp. Got to get a good crimp on that shield on the radio wire. Right? to me, this one kind of borders on criminal. These sub-connectors, they need back shells on them. And they need to be screwed into the place that they're connected to. Otherwise, they will, in fact, vibrate off. Right? The one here on the left, get a load of this one. Here you have one that's not supported properly, no back shell connector, and you know what that is? It's a backup battery for the EFAs. So right when you're going to need something, the worst possible time, the backup battery's not going to work. These two here, this one came in with a bunch of intermittents. The connectors were never ever tied together. And it's okay to tie them together with zip ties, you know, where you're making connections or making some extension cables, but they need to be solidly connected to each other. You know, you got to use all the bolts. We don't call them lightning holes. This is the RV10 fuselage attach. Half of the bolts. Okay. Yeah, this should have been caught when it was licensed, but it wasn't. And this was a flying airplane for many, many years. Okay. Again, I've seen this multiple times. I see this a lot. Missing cotter keys. This is a rudder cable right down by the pedal. You got to put the cotter key in. Oh. This one probably looks familiar to somebody. Okay, you don't have to raise your hand, but this one, you know, it speaks for itself. We fly airplanes with tight wheel pants on them, and sometimes we just pull them out of the hangar. Actually, a lot of times, I have probably a dozen pictures like this I could show you. I actually had one of my customers call me and tell me he needed tires changed on his airplane. Can you come and get it? And I went and got his airplane, and I looked at it, and I shouldn't have flown it, but I did. Said, I'm landing on grass. Should be okay, right? Now, it went flat on grass, okay? And it had nothing to do with my landing, okay? So, yeah, I know the airlines sometimes can run them with some cord showing, but those are big tires, all right? And for those of you doing formation takeoffs out here, having your tires in just pristine shape along with your brakes is really, really important. Get rid of everything you can for the risk factor, right? What's that? Did you catch that? New call sign tread for that owner. Okay. Here's one. I bet fully half of the RVs on this field don't have this one done right. Right? This is the air box. So your air filter is right up inside here. You're supposed to have 2 drain holes. This is the filter. If you can see the ring right here, goes this way. That's your air filter inside the air box. Okay? For those of you with carbureted engines, you know, you pump the throttle when you're trying to start it a cold day and it doesn't start. Guess where all that fuel ends up? Right down here in the air box inside the air filter. If you don't have a drain hole right there, it's not going to drain out. Now, if you get a backfire on that next attempt to start, guess what happens? Kaboom, okay, and a fire. This, you know what this drain hole's for? Take a look at how these airplanes sit. As a matter of fact, you turn around and you look at the Dons back there. There's a good view of the air box, and it sits out there. Don flies it up to Oshkosh, and it rains. Rains hard up at Oshkosh, right? How many people have been up there and it hasn't rained at Oshkosh? Probably nobody. All the water runs right down into the snout if you don't put a cover on it. So you want this drain hole back here to get all the water and stuff that might get in there. But don't suck it up into the engine when you're trying to start it. Okay? How many people have their oil coolers mounted on their aft cylinder? Yeah, go take a look if you haven't, or maybe you've already had the problem. It's just a matter of when they do crack. You just can't hang them off of the baffling. You either need to support it there with some really thick 6061 T6, like 1/8 inch thick, or personally I tell you, I just mount them on the firewall. That way they don't crack. Back to the cylinder shaking around in flight like a wet dog. You're hanging about a 5-pound oil cooler off that cylinder. It's going to crack. Okay. Here's some closing thoughts before you all fall asleep. Change your oil more than once a year. I wanted to bring over some oil here this afternoon that was blacker than your black shirt. Okay, it'd been in there for an hour. You know, well, I only flew it 40 hours, been in there for a year. It was horrible. You know, we got 25, 30, 40, $50,000 engines on the front of our airplanes. Oil is a minuscule expense. But, you know, the engine manufacturers recommend that we should change it how many hours? 25, I hear 25? 50? So we all kind of practice 50, right? I tell you, I practice 30, 35 on my own engine. Lycoming will tell you that one of the worst decisions they ever made was when they allowed everybody to go to filters and said you can go to 50 hours now. All their warranty claims went up. 25 hours is still kind of a good range for the oil, and it's not that much to change it. Time, yes. Time. So every 4 months is a recommended interval. So 3 times a year, 4 months, or hour-wise, right? Like we just discussed. Yes. And a filter, yeah. I always change. So let me tell you what I do. So everybody's thinking, wow, these filters are $20 each, right? So I know how. We're all cheap as pilots, right? I can hear it here. Okay. I'll tell you what I did on mine. There's a company called Challenger. They make a really nice oil. It's basically I think a 125 micron screen. It looks like an oil filter, and it screws on, and you take it off each time, and the element comes out, and you clean it, and you put it all back together. They're a little pricey, I think a couple $100 or something, but the payback is, you know, you find a couple $100 a year, the payback's pretty quickly. I like it. I'll tell you why I like it is, how many people here cut their oil filters open? Oh, that's nice to see. How many people enjoy doing that? Ooh, we have some sadists out here. A couple people raised their hands. I have some filters I'll have you cut open, okay? I hate that. It's a messy job, right? It's not only a messy job, you gotta hold it up, and then we all argue. Boy, how big are these pieces? Is it a quarter teaspoon, right? That's the limit, kind of thing. The screen that you pull out of this Challenger one, I just pull it out and I put it in a glass bottle, like an old applesauce jar, and fill it full of cleaner, gas, quite honestly. Shake it up, pull the screen out, it's all clean, blow it out, and I let that stuff settle and pour it through a paper towel. You can see exactly what you got. No mess, okay? And I just like it, just works a whole lot easier. Yes?
I've got one of those filters, but I put it on 5 years ago.
Oh, good.
And the element insert needs to be changed every 5 years.
Yes, I forgot about that. You're right. It's what the elements, thank you. The element's supposed to be changed every 5 years. That's right. Yes? Challenger. And Spruce has them over here, actually. Aircraft Spruce. Okay. What else? Hey, brake pads. I see so many that come through and they're right down to the rivets. They're just tearing up the rotors. Okay? Don't wait till they squeal. I know we're used to doing that in our cars, but you can't hear them squeal because we've got an engine running. So there aren't any squeal indicators on airplane brake pads. You got to check those. For most of you that are newly transitioning to RVs, it's the right brake you're going to wear out because of the torque on takeoff. So if you keep your eye on the right brake, it'll be a good indicator on when both of them probably ought to get replaced. Those of you who are transitioning to the new nose gear ones, you're going to wear out the brake pads quite a bit the first year. So just keep your eye on them, right, before the damage gets done. How many people here make the annual ELT entry? How many people don't know about the annual ELT entry? How many would admit it? Oh, we do have one. Thanks, Scott. Scott's a new builder, though, so that's okay. So that's one of the most things I see missed all the time in our airplanes is it is required to make an annual ELT operational check in your logbook. Anybody can do that. You don't need to be a mechanic. Just the owner-operator should do that, right? Make sure that gets done. How many people have painted their airplane here after they flew it for the first time or flew off the test program? How many people redid the weight and balance? Oh, that's good to see. I see a lot of them come through no new weight and balance after paint. And if you look at how much paint gets added after the CG in our airplanes, it's really, really important to do a weight and balance after your paint. So don't forget that one, all right? Anybody want to tell me what the overhaul recommendations are on our propellers? Hard cell propellers on our airplanes, constant speed?
Whirlwind.
Whirlwind's even got less of a time. Come on, somebody tell me. I have a signed hat by Vance who can come up with the right number.
7 years.
7 years or Yeah, I get to keep, I don't have one of these. I want to keep it. Okay. So no, it's, did anybody get, so it is 7 years or 2,000 hours. Okay. And you know what? 7 years goes by pretty fast, right? Even the older we get, it seems to go by faster. And I know what you're thinking, that's just a recommended kind of thing. This is Vic's opinion on this, and I'll tell you what I'll see on all the airplanes that I've worked on. Right? First off, we get to see, how many flying airplanes do we have here? 48 maybe? 48 or so? How many propellers do you think Hartzell or the prop shop see every week? A whole lot more. There's a reason why they come up with those numbers. I've seen them. We pulled 2 off just in the last couple of weeks. And actually, because they were both at 8 hours, and my hat was off to the owners because they requested it be done. I didn't have to mention it. And guess what? One of the propellers didn't pass. Brand new, 7 years, it had to be shot peaked. The other one was fine. So you can pull yours off, any one of the 3 in here, and go, yeah, see, mine's okay, and everybody else, I don't need to do it. We have 1 engine, we have 1 propeller. We ought to take care of them, right? Don?
I've got a booklet on my Whirlwind, and I flew it up to Whirlwind literally in Ohio and let them go over it about a year ago.
Yep, Whirlwind has a great service doing that,
Being a
flying in the
non-builder,
time.
I don't take any chances.
Yep, good for you. Good for you. So, pay attention there. I think that might be the last slide, right? Open it up to questions, or are you tired of hearing from me? Yeah.
I'll throw out some, Vic, on some of these 406 ELTs. I've got one in one plane. It has 3 batteries. So people aren't used to that. The battery in the ELT, a battery in a warning buzzer, and a battery in the control box.
Yes, thanks, John. So John brought up a good point. I don't know if you can hear him. The new 406 ELTs, we're used to checking the battery in the box ELT. There's also the little, control panel up in the instrument panel. It's got the red and black button for test and reset. That has a battery in it. It's usually good for 10 years. It's just a little watch battery, basically. And then, when you test your 406s, you hear the beep beep, hopefully 1 beep, depending on the manufacturer. That's the horn container behind the instrument panel. That also has a battery in it that you need to check and replace as well. Thanks, Tom. Yeah.
Oil filter screen plug gasket. Does the seam face the engine or the face?
The seam faces the engine. Yes. So the question was on the copper asbestos gaskets, washers, brush washers, put the asbestos towards the engine. Right?
How many turns that would take on that?
So they're all spec'd. There's a spec for each one to turn. By the way, if you don't have AC 4313, you ought to have it because it'll give you that answer. It's hard to memorize them all, quite honestly. But depending on the size of the washer will tell you how many turns, or how many degrees of turn, I should say, after it's contacted the surface that you should go. Okay? And those need to be safety wired.
You put those washers on there, the kind of washers you're talking about, the kind of on my property, or the washers, that's supposed to safety wire.
The Nordlock washers? Yes. Yeah. No, you can't. Nordlock won't go on those. No. These are real big washers, the copper clutch washers. The screen's not big, but the thing that turns where the washer goes is pretty good size. It's an AN9. It's a 21, I think, -21 gasket. Oh, listen, thanks for coming. I hope, my objective tonight is that you're all sitting there going, I need to go check this on mine. And I'm going to make this offer. How many people are going on the Idaho trip this fall? Yeah, me too. So here's my offer to all of you who are going. Like a month or 2 before we leave, if you open up your airplanes, I will come and look at them for you. Because what I really like to do is go on vacation, and we all have fun, and the airplanes don't take center stage for maintenance issues.
I think all I want to do is look at my instrument panel and get out of the airplane and make sure the master's
Don wants us to make sure his master switch is off. Yeah. Yes?
What's the process of the heat from how busy are you? You gotta get your airplane over there or show up.
Yeah, no, don't just show up. We're really busy. We're averaging 4 to 6 airplanes in the shop. The question is, how busy are we? Let me tell you this, though. This group here is a priority for us. All right, especially if you have an airplane that's AOG, if you have a problem, please give me a call. We'll figure it out. We'll get you taken care of. Long term, if you want condition inspections and such, I really need a couple months' notice. What I'd like to do is get you on an ongoing calendar basis. For those of you who have some showing up this month, I know I've got a couple of requests. I'll work with you on those. We'll figure it out, but we're staying very, very busy. Okay? But I am here to help. I won't do this to anybody. We'll figure out the answer for you. Okay? It's important to me that we're all safe here. I sit over there and watch all you guys go flying, so anything we can do to help.
Where's your new hangar? On the other side of 31 over there?
Yeah, so this worked out. I can't believe how this worked out, but we named ourselves Base Leg Aviation, and we're on base leg to 3-1. It just worked out. So when you're landing on 3-1, you're on the left-hand side. You'll fly right over it when you're on base leg.
Okay.
Only one over there.
Okay, so yeah, we're the only hangar there now. Hopefully that'll change in the not too distant future, but we're the only hangar over there now. Okay. Thanks. Anybody have any other questions? Anybody have any questions? Greg is here from Vans. I don't know if you... Yes, you have a question?
Is there a new model being developed? Yeah, oh, he says yes, there is a new model.
I forgot I had some more props. Wheel pant brackets, they crack. I'll pass it around because we're all going to get up. You can come here and take a look at them. Springs on RV12s, 912s, kind of exhaust springs. They wear and break. For those of you flying RV12s, I'd recommend, I always carry a couple in my toolbox in the back because they will break. For those of you who have these senders for your oil pressure, fuel pressure gauges, they do wear out. And your first sign is you'll get kind of fluctuations and you'll be thinking you'll have an oil pressure or fuel pressure problem. I meant to bring the one that I cut open to show everybody, and my apologies, I left it at home. There's just a little wiper arm in there. And if you look at and pay attention to your fuel pressure lines and oil pressure lines that feed these guys, they should have a little restrictor, a tiny fitting in there. You can make one out of a rivet, just drill a number 60 hole. It'll dampen the pulses, and these things will last a lot longer for you. All right? I think that's all I had. So thanks for coming. Oh, sorry.